So what's going on in Ukraine? Well, let's begin with the premise, right? Because we can get lost in the details. We did this with COVID. We do this with the climate nonsense. We get lost in details. Stay on the premise. What's the premise? Global governance is the premise. This, Agenda 21, 2030, right? Forget about the names. It doesn't matter. The premise is global governance. A global empire with all nations reduced and eventually eroded completely. So how does Ukraine feed into the COVID shit that we've been going through and the climate nonsense we've been going through? Well, just to get out the way what the motivations are for Russia here, Ukraine allows Russia to have a Eurasia, right? Access to the oceans, naval fleets, energy through Europe, all of this kind of stuff. Yes, that's a big part of it. But above Biden, above Putin, there are people that want this global empire fulfilled. A Eurasia that Ukraine would offer them would certainly help that. But there's a bigger purpose. America's conflict in Ukraine, if it were to happen, and even if it doesn't happen, like the failure in Afghanistan, brings America down from prominence on the world stage. And that is critical, because bearing in mind, if you want to fulfill a global empire, there can be no America's prominence. No nation can be number one, apart from China, which will act as the United Nations proxy for a bit, up until that 2030 deadline. Then the global empire becomes more official. So that's what the whole Ukraine thing's about. But there's a bigger devastation that will happen than what I would probably say in the conflict itself, which is the economic devastation. Let's not forget that the lockdowns, the whole COVID thing, the whole climate stuff, the whole war stuff, it's all connected. The lockdowns, obviously, that have caused basically a third to a half of all of our wealth to be stolen, to be lost, which is likely going to be the biggest economic depression we've ever had if we don't get ahead of it. That will ensure that China and Russia drop the US dollar as a reserve currency, which further decimates our economy in the West and in America in particular, and reduces America's prominence on the world stage. No longer an American-centric world. Hello, China as the United Nations proxy. 2030. Hello, global governance and global empire. So this is how it all fits together. That Eurasia that Ukraine would help Russia and China link into is half the world, pretty much, with America reducing, with the currency being decimated, which has obviously massively helped through lockdowns, basically just ensures that our American-centric system will no longer be prominent. And that's what it's really all about. Never forget, it's about the premise. The premise is global governance. And the premises then that follow have to support that conclusion that they are looking for. And this is no different to any of the other shit we've been going through. Do not lose focus.